Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the early title Tuesday, today, October 1st of the great year 2024. Now, the first game we're going to be taking a look at is a game featuring yours truly, myself, Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, playing against International Master Christopher Wu Jin Yu from the United States. Now, it's a very tense 10th round battle, both of us on 7.5 points out of 9. The winner of this will have a chance to potentially win the final round and win the whole chalupa. So, let's jump right into the action. So I'm playing with the white pieces, and the game starts out with d4. We get knight f6, and here I play the move bishop g5. Now, some of you may have noticed I have a slightly different background because I'm currently in London playing in the Global Chess League, which starts on Thursday, October 3rd. And earlier in the event, I did actually play the London system because London is calling. But after having played it earlier in the event, I decided to go for one of my other favorite openings, the classic Trump house key with bishop g5. Christopher Yu plays d5, I go e3, now we get c5, and here I play the move c3. Now he plays knight to c6, and here I play the move knight d2, and we get this move queen b6. At this point, I decide to play the move queen c2, trying to guard the pawn on b2, but also stopping black from putting the bishop on f5. If I were to play queen c1, for example, black can go bishop f5, and suddenly I can't put my queen on c2 or my bishop on d3, and black controls the clear diagonal here. So, in this position, I go queen c2, Christopher Yu plays bishop g4, and now I play the move h3. We get bishop to h5. Black is trying to reroute this bishop and put it on the long diagonal anyway. Here I take on c5, we get queen c5, and now I play this move queen b3. We get rook b8, and now I play the move knight f3. Christopher plays e6, and here I decide to go for this move bishop b5. Now, one of the difficult things when you're playing blitz is that you're generally trying to come up with ideas and put pressure on your opponent right away, and this is a tough spot because either I can move quickly here and play a move like bishop b5, play a move like bishop to e2, but I have to make some quick decisions. I can't afford to spend a lot of time because otherwise it will come back to hurt me down the line. So I go bishop b5. Now we get bishop d6, and I decide to play this move rook c1. My idea is quite straightforward. What I want to do here is play for this move c4 to open up this diagonal. So here Christopher goes a6, now I play bishop e2, and he correctly plays move b5, stopping me from playing c4 as the pawns on b5 and d5 cover this critical square. So what do? I decide to trade the bishop for the knight, trying to ruin his pawn structure, and now I go e4, but Yu plays the move bishop takes knight, and this is simply a move that I, for whatever reason, overlooked here, because I thought that in this position, bishop f4 would be played, but after takes, bishop f3, bishop takes f3, let's just say knight e5, for example, I can play something like knight e4, and the position should be okay for white. So Christopher takes on f3, I take with the bishop, now Yu plays bishop f4, and here I go for the move rook d1. Now at this point I'm already a little bit unhappy, but here again I should have taken this pawn on d5, allowing black to take the knight here, because now after king takes, queen f2 and king d1, oddly enough, white should be fine after knight to e5 and this move rook c2, kicking the queen off of the second rank. Say black goes queen b6 to guard the pawn. Now I can slide the king over to c1 and b1. I'm manually castling the king, and I should not be worse. So instead I go rook d1, and now Yu plays knight to e5, and here already it's very, very dangerous. I play this move queen c2. Now I did not want to play this move. I wanted to go pawn takes pawn, but after knight d3, checking the king, if I go to f1, queen f2 is spaghetti time. King gets mated on f1, and after king e2, knight takes f2, black is forking these rooks, but on top of forking these rooks, there's a very nasty threat of going for queen to e3, which checkmates the white pawn clouded king in the middle of the board. So I go queen c2 to stop knight d3. Now we get the move d4, and here I play the move bishop e2. Yu takes on c3, and now I play knight to b3. We get queen to c7, and here I go for the move g3. We got bishop to h6, and now I play the move f4, and we get knight d7. Now this is a very tough spot and highlights one of the big difficulties in trying to win Title Tuesday, which is at this point in the game, I'm very slightly worse, but it's much better than it was a few moves ago. And what I would probably play in a classical game is take with the queen and play this very slightly worse endgame. Now the reason I did not play this endgame is that I perceived that my chance of winning were close to 0, and with 7.5 points out of 9, I felt like I needed to go for more. So instead, I play this move pawn takes pawn, keeping queens on the board. We get rook g8. Now I go rook to d3, guarding the pawn on g3, and Yu plays knight b6. Here I go knight to d2, and now we get rook to d8, and I go king f2, trying to bring my last piece, the rook on h1, into the game. We get queen c5, I go king f3, we get king e7. Yu is able to play a bomb cloud because he's got all these pawns centered around the king, and the black king is as snug as a bug in a rug. So here I go knight b3, we get queen c7, and now I play the move rook hd1. Yu plays the move rook takes rook. Worth pointing out that black could have sacked the rook with a rook takes pawn, and this actually is winning for black. Now during the game, I thought after takes, queen takes f4, king g2, rook g8, and bishop to g4, I was completely fine. But apparently after queen e4, let's just say king g1, black can play the move bishop to e3, and after king h2, there's the move f5 here, because now the knight covers a d7 square, and my king is very weak, and black's pieces are all coordinated perfectly. So instead we get rook takes rook. Now I take, and we have the move knight c4 being played. Now black has a nice bastion with the knight on c4. The king on f3 is not very well placed. At this point, it's looking very unlikely that I can win the game. So I play the move knight d4. We get rook d8. Now I play the move queen d1, and here we get rook d6. Now queen d1 is simply a blunder, as black can go for knight b2 fork, but Yu misses it. Instead he plays rook d6, and now I blunder with king g2, allowing the knight b2 fork again. Knights can be very tricky, and unfortunately here I've simply missed this move, and now I'm probably going to lose the game. So I go queen d2, we get takes, takes, and now we have the move queen c5. If black were to play e5, trying to pin the knight on d4, you walk into the knight f5, forking the king, the rook, and the bishop. So we get queen c5. Here I go queen e3, and now we have king e8. Again, if black were to play a move like b4, I have knight to f5, checking the king and creating the classic fossil here, where I win the black queen. So we get king e8. I go queen f3, we got b4, and now I go e5. As you can also tell, both of us are very low on time here, so it's a big scramble to the finish line. We get takes, takes, takes. I go check, king e7, and now I go bishop f3. We get pawn takes pawn, and I play the move knight c6. Here, Chris Views sacks the rook with rook takes knight. I take, and now he goes queen to e3. Now, I have gotten back the rook for the horse, but the problem here is that black simply has two extra pawns in the middle of the board here. The c pawn is very dangerous. Queen d2 is coming as well, and here it's going to take a small miracle not to lose the game. So I go h4. We get queen d2, king h3, and now we have the move c2 being played. Here I go queen c7, we get king f8, and now I go over this move bishop h5, hoping that black will promote to a second queen, because then I get the checkmate on f7. Unfortunately, Yu plays queen to f2, guarding the pawn on f7, guarding the pawn on c2, but also the bishop on h6 covers the c1 square, and if black is able to push p with c1, black will win the game. So I go queen c4 here. Now this is simply a mistake in the position. What I should have played was check, king g7, check, king g8, and check. Now after bishop to f8, black is winning, but at least here black is not able to promote the pawn to a queen. So here I go queen c4, Yu promotes to a queen, and now I play queen b4. Now when you look at this position, you'll notice that Yu plays this move and he has 1 second left on the clock. Now according to the basic rules on chess.com, you should not be able to move with less than 0.1 on your clock, so you should never be able to have less than 1.1 seconds, but I guess Yu's move gets in just before it goes to 0. So I play check. We get king g7. At this point, I'm moving instantly, trying to cheese him hard on the clock. We get king f8, and here I play queen d4. And now Yu blitzes out king g8, trying to go for the pre-move. Now, probably what Yu expected was for me to play queen b4, checking the king, and then king g8 is a good pre-move. But instead, he goes king g8, pre-moving the queen. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm moving super fast. So I'm trying to flag him as well, and now I play queen to d8 check. Terrible move. We get bishop f8, and I play queen d4. But now Yu plays bishop g7, hanging the queen on f2 for a second time and doing a Botez gambit, and this is simply inexplicable here, because at this point, black should basically be tunneled on queen g5 check, or just move the queen anywhere, f1, f5, any square. But Yu plays bishop g7, and this time I do not miss. I take the queen on f2, and now Yu mouse slips with queen g1, hanging his second queen in a row. He does a double Botez gambit, hanging both of his queens in 2 moves, and here I take the queen, and I'm going to win the game. Now, it's worth pointing out that instead of taking the queen, queen takes f7 actually leads to a checkmate after king h8, queen e8, bishop f8, and queen takes f8. But when I see queen g1 on the board, of course, I'm going to snap the juicer. We got bishop e5. I go queen to f1. And here, Christopher Yu resigns this game after an absolute heartbreak. He does a double Botez gambit in succession, hanging both of his queens on 2 consecutive moves to lose this game and ruin his chances of winning the title Tuesday. Now, unfortunately for me, I would go on to play the final round against leader Alexander Bornik, but I was unable to win that game, even though I did have a winning position, which meant that I was unable to win the title Tuesday. So that's the story of my tournament. Now, the next game we're going to be taking a look at is a game featuring the two-time world championship contender, a man who played against Magnus Carlsen and Ding Laurent for the World Chess Championship crown. And he is playing against the famous YouTuber and international master, Levy Rozman, in the third round of the same aforementioned Title Tuesday. So Jan, two-time world championship challenger playing against this random IM on YouTube. Surely he's going to win, right? After all, he is a top 5 or top 10 grandmaster at this point. So Jan opens with e4, and now Levy plays the move c5. Now, it's great to see Levy branching out. Levy has been playing the Carocom pretty much exclusively since he came back to chess a couple of months ago, but now he decides to play the Sicilian, taking the advice of that famous grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, who said that Levy needed to add some variety to his repertoire. Now, the other great thing with this is that Levy has a chance to play openings against players who have a lot of experience. People are going to bring their best lines in the Sicilian, so he gets his practice almost for free in a sense against strong grandmasters. We get knight f3. We have knight c6 being played by Levy, and now we get bishop b5, and Levy plays the move e6 here. This, of course, is the Rosslimo. White could play d4, and this is, of course, the open Sicilian. Would have been interesting to see whether Levy would have played the Taimanov system, Taimanov-Paulsen with e6. Maybe he would have played the Sicilian 4 knights with knight f6 and e6 like Anna Kramling. Maybe he would have played something like a classical Sicilian as well, or even something like the Lowenthal or the other one, the Kalashnikov, which I've played a bit as well. Instead, we don't get to see this. We got bishop b5, e6, castles, and now Levy plays knight g7. Here we get the move d4, takes, and Levy plays the move g6. Now, this move is simply a little bit dubious in the position. This variation with d4 takes, knight d4 was really popularized from the white side by the famous grandmaster and world championship challenger candidate Fabiano Caruana against Boris Gelfand some years back. So it's considered to be one of the sharpest lines. And black normally here, I believe, is supposed to play the move queen b6. And after takes, bishop e2, or bishop d3, the show goes on. Instead, Levy plays g6 here. Now he's trying to fianchetto the bishop to g7 and castle the king out of the center immediately. We get bishop to e2 played by Jan, a6 played here by Levy. Now, a6 is a move designed to stop knight b5. Probably Levy thought that after bishop g7, maybe knight b5 was incoming here with this knight d6 idea. But after d5 is played here, black is completely fine. One sample line would be bishop f4. And now you can very smoothly just castle, ignoring the forks. If white goes knight c7 here, now you can take the pawn on b2 and win the rook. And if white plays a move like knight c3, now you have d4, let's just say knight b1 and e5 to build a big black center. And this fianchetto bishop is very nicely placed as well, so black has no issues. But Levy is, of course, new to playing these systems, so instead he plays a6 here, trying to stop the knight b5 idea, and now we get the move c4. Levy goes bishop g7, and here we get knight f3. And at this point, white has achieved the classic Maroczy bind structure with the pawns on c4 and e4. It's worth pointing out here that white probably should have traded and then played knight to c3, but instead we got knight f3. Now, normally when white gets the Maroczy bind, let's just say black puts a pawn on h6 and knight c3, black is really struggling because you don't really have the breaks on either b5 or d5 here, and white is quite a bit better due to the spatial advantage. But here, white has not developed the knight to c3 yet, so Levy is able to play d5 immediately, striking at white's center here. You've got the open diagonal for the bishop, and actually, Levy has done quite well. He is barely worse in this position against one of the greatest players of the modern generation. So here we get e takes d5, e takes d5, knight c3, and now Levy plays the move d4. Now, the computer would have preferred d takes c4, and after bishop takes c4 castles, black isn't better per se, but it's pretty close to equal here. You're going to have these two b's on these very nice diagonals. Bishop can go to f5 or g4 here, and black has no issues whatsoever. Instead, Levy goes d4, we get knight to e4 castles, and now we have the move bishop f4 being played. Levy goes bishop to f5, and now we get the move knight d6, and with the bishop guarding the knight targeting both the bishop and the pawn at the same time, Levy has some issues. So Levy goes queen b6, we get queen to b3 played here, queen takes, pawn takes, and now we have the move bishop c2. At this point, it's also very abundantly clear that Ian Nepomniachtchi is trying to cheese Levy on the clock, get him low, and induce blunders, as queen b3 was simply not the best move in the position. So we get bishop c2, bishop d1 is played, Levy goes d3 here, opening up the scope for the dark square b. We get knight takes pawn, and now we have the move knight f5. Here, Jan plays knight to a5, we get bishop takes pawn, and now we have the move rook to a2. Now, bishop takes pawn is a mistake here. The computer prefers knight to d4, because after takes, uses very nice pass pawn in the center of the board. A lot of squares for the horse, and this bishop on an open diagonal. Additionally, you also can potentially claim both the e and the d files. So all the piece activity for the sacrifice pawn on b7 here, Levy would have been doing very well. So he goes bishop takes pawn. Now here, Jan should have played the move knight takes knight. Again, I think that Jan was trying to blitz here. You see, you look at the time, playing rook a2 immediately. If white, he were to go knight takes knight, after takes, you take the bishop, takes, and rook takes a1. And now white has a bishop and a knight in return for the rook, and the pawn on c2 is also very loose. After a4, knight d4, white will eat the juicer on c2 and should be winning the game. But Jan goes rook a2 immediately. Now we get knight takes knight, rook takes bishop, and here Levy plays the move rook fe8. Now Levy is struggling in this position, but one thing that I really like about his play is he is not getting super low on time. He's using some time, but he's not down to 5 seconds, and if he's able to play, even if it's a little bit worse, against a top player like Jan, it probably won't be good enough to save the game, but against a 23 or 2400, it definitely will be good enough. So we get rook fe8. Nepo plays g4. We get rook to e4 being played here, and this is a fantastic move, targeting the bishop and the pawn. Now, one thing I've said many times about Levy's play, he's a very good, very tactical player. When the positions are open and it's very tactical, he tends to play at a much higher level, I would say, than say a 2350 international master. So when he gets these positions that are free flowing, especially when it's tactical and blitz, he can find these great moves. So we get rook e4. Jan takes, we get takes, and now we have bishop takes, pawn takes, and here we get the move knight to d2. Levy now takes the pawn on f5, and we get rook takes c2. And at this point, we're in an endgame where both sides have the same number of pawns on the board. White has potentially slightly better pawns on the queen side. You've got the b and the c pawns. You can maybe go after the pawn on a6, but nonetheless, Levy should be fine. So we get knight c6 here. Black stops white from going b4. You can also put the horse on d4 to start forking, and white still has to be careful. Jan goes rook c3, we get knight d4, and now we have king g2 played. Obviously, if white were to play a random blank move like h4, you'd walk into knight e2 check, forking the king and the rook. So we get king g2. Levy goes rook e8, we get rook to e3, and now we have rook d8, and here the move knight e4 is played. Now Levy goes king g7, and we get the move rook d1. At this point, the tide is starting to shift. Levy's getting pushed around on the clock here. He's also starting to lose the squares for the knight. White's starting to push the pawns up the board, and it's looking like things are going the wrong way. So we get knight e6, we get takes, takes. Now Jan plays rook d3, we get knight c6, and here we have the move rook d6. Now at this point, Jan is up 30 seconds to 4 seconds, 26-second edge, and a much better position. You really do expect him to convert this. So you get knight e5. Move rook takes a6 is played, and now we have the move rook f4 from Levy, and here we get the move knight c3. Now this move is also a strange move here. Jan uses 10 seconds before playing it. What he should have done is played it with like either knight to d2 or knight to c5 here. Both of these moves would have been very good as white is starting to try and push the pawns up the board, but instead he goes knight c3. Now Levy plays the move knight to d3, which is a slight miss here. If he had played rook to f3, he would win either the horse on c3 or the pawn on b3 and have no issues at all, but instead he goes knight d3. Now we get knight to d1, here he plays knight e1, king f1, knight f3, and here we get the move rook d6. Now this is also a little bit strange, honestly. I'm surprised a move like h3 wasn't played potentially here, but we have rook d6. We get knight h2, king e2, and now knight g4 is played by Levy, and here Jan plays move knight e3, and this is simply a ridiculous move with 16 seconds on the clock. In this position, if white starts pushing the p up the board, black is really hard pressed to stop the pawns. Rook f6 is the best computer line, but after rook d4, knight to e5, and now b4, let's just say knight c6, and rook c4, white is starting to push this p up the board, and I'm not really convinced that Levy could have stopped it. One sample line is knight a7, but now after knight c3, I'm pushing b5, I'm pushing c6, and once the pawns get rolling, you will resign the game. So instead we get knight e3. Now Levy plays move knight f6, and this is also a blunder. Mind you, Levy is very low on time, but if you were to go rook f2, king to e1, and rook to f6, very important move by the way, now you offer the trade of the rooks, and you're simply up a pawn on the king side. After takes, takes, b4 and king to f8, the black king will get over in time to stop these pawns here on the queen side. You can push these pawns up the board and zero chance of losing. Instead, Levy goes knight f6, and now we get the move b4, allowing knight to e4 here, attacking the pawn and the rook at the same time. Here, Jan plays rook d4, we get the move f5 being played, and now we have this inexplicable move f3, which is just a huge mistake here. If Jan had played the move knight to d1 here, white would be close to winning. Probably Jan thought black is knight to c3, creating a fossil as you check the king, and you attack the rook. But after king d3, rook, takes, knight d1, and b5. Suddenly the b pawn is going up the board. It's 3 squares away from queening, and black cannot stop the pawn. Instead, we get f3, and now Levy plays knight g3, checking the king, attacking the rook. We get king d3, rook takes f3, and all of a sudden, not only is the time evened out, but Levy is now on the brink of winning as he's threatening to push f4 and win this horse on e3. Nepo goes rook d7, we get king to h6, and now we have the move king to d2. Levy goes rook f2, we get king c3, and now we get knight to e4, and we have the move king b3. Here, rook f3 is played, Nepo plays rook d3, and now we get the move king to g5. Here we have c5 being played, and this is a move that effectively loses the game. If Nepo had played king to c2 here, trying to guard the rook, after h5, c5 in this position, it would still be very much a game. But when we get the move c5, now Levy is able to play the move f4. The knight on e3 is pinned. You can't move it without losing the tower in the game. If you push p here, I can just trade everything off. And after c7, knight d6, my knight stops the pawns, and suddenly black is winning. So Levy has played f4, now time is even. It looks like he's going to beat one of the greatest players of the modern generation, and we'll see if this indeed happens. We get king c4, rook takes knight, we have rook d5, king f6, and now Nepo plays rook d7. Here, Levy goes f3, simply pushing his p with the knight guarding the pawn. He will go rook e1 and win the game. We have rook to d8, king e7 played by Levy, we get rook d1, and now after the move f2, Ian Nepomniachtchi, the two-time world championship challenger, one of the perennial top 5 players of all time, has to resign this position to a random international master YouTuber who makes videos and does not play chess professionally. Oh, the embarrassment and the shame for Ian. That being said, from Levy's standpoint, he played very well, kept playing, kept defending, and Ian is actually one who cracks in this position. I wonder if there wasn't a bit of a Levy effect here, where when Levy didn't lose the game, he didn't fall apart the way that Ian was expecting him to. Ian got frustrated and simply lost his focus. Now, for Levy, great game, defends, plays very, very well. As I've said many times, for Levy, the big issue he has is getting the positions that are tactile very, very much in the flow in a way that some of the positional games he's played recently aren't. I also would say it's great to see him playing an opening like this. It's not opening he plays much, but even though he doesn't play the opening, he still understood the themes quite well in a blitz game. And if your intuition is good and he plays moves like d5 here, it shows he understands the structure, and I think that him adding the Sicilian to his repertoire will help him in his path towards trying to become a grandmaster. So, Levy would win this game. He would end up coming very close to beating Alexander Grischuk as well before losing on time. Nonetheless, a huge victory for Levy should help his confidence to some degree as he beats another top 10 player in the world. So, on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the early title Tuesday, today, October 1st of the great year 2024. I am currently in London playing the Global Chess League, which starts on Thursday, so we will be doing recaps when I play against Vishy Anand, Magnus Carlsen, Anish Giri, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and there's probably one other player I'm forgetting right now, but I'm going to be playing against a lot of the legends of the game. Magnus Carlsen, I think I mentioned as well, but a lot of legends of the game that I'm going to be competing against here, so I will be doing my recaps, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the title Tuesday. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with some more great recaps in the coming days and weeks. I'll see you guys soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye!